Hey folks, we're on Roots Week 6, day number 2 today, finishing out the flood story. That runs from Genesis chapter 8, verse 1, all the way down through chapter 9, verse 17. Today we're just sort of going to focus in on just a few verses from that, just for the purposes of this video. I'm getting this up today a little bit late just because I was tied up for the earlier part of the day with the funeral. Just to be honest, it was a pretty rough one. It was actually Preacher Mike's grandson. If y'all would, please remember Preacher Mike and his family in your prayers. They could certainly use that right now. But I'm actually drawing some comfort out of this verse. So I'm looking forward to getting into it. Just for this full disclosure, a guy named Jared Wilson wrote an article on the Gospel Coalition called "When God Lays Down His Bow" that was really helpful. So just focus in for a second on chapter 9, verses 12 all the way down through verse 16. It says this, and this is, by the way, at the end of the flood, Noah's gotten off the ark. He's talking with God at this point, so just full disclosure. It says, "And God said, 'This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all future generations.'" We're going to get into what a covenant means in just a few weeks. That's not far off. So just for now, let it suffice to say that it's sort of like a promise in a relationship where people are working together. So just leave it there for now. Goes on in verse 13, "I have placed my bow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I form clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all the living creatures. Water will never again become a flood to destroy every creature. The bow will be in the clouds, and I will look at it and remember the permanent covenant between God and all the living creatures on the earth." Now, we know the bow as the rainbow. It rains and, the pretty rainbow comes up on the clouds. The Hebrew there, and it is referring to a rainbow, but God calls it his bow. The word there is the same word for bow, like bow and arrow, like you would take out and you would shoot things with. What God is doing in this scenario is essentially he is putting up his bow and arrow, the thing that he would make war with. He's putting it up in the clouds. He's not picking it up. And so this is a promise that when we look outside, I can imagine Noah would have been pretty terrified when he saw rain clouds outside. And sometimes we get terrified too, because we look outside, we see these big storm clouds coming. And storms can obviously do a ton of damage on the earth. But the rainbow, God put that up there to remind us that he will never again flood the entire earth. He's not going to wipe out all life with a flood again. And that makes a great promise for us, because it's a promise about how God is going to operate. We're going to find ourselves in the middle of trials. We're going to find ourselves in the middle of pain, in the middle of suffering, in the middle of testing, and all sorts of different ways. But it will never be this permanent thing. Just like, we look out and we see the rainbow, and really what happens with the rainbow is that means the showers are kind of on their way out and the sun is starting to peek through. It's a sign that it's going to end at a certain point. Well, in the same way, when we find ourselves in the middle of trials, we can remember that they are not permanent. They will not last forever. In one way, shape, or form, God is going to rescue us from those things and bring us out the other side. As the Bible says, there may be pain in the night, but joy will come in the morning. So we have that incredible hope as Christians. Every time we look at the rainbow, yes, we might suffer now, but joy will come in the morning. God is not going to let everything end like this. So cling to that hope right now in the midst of your trials.